Hello and welcome to the F1 News Zone, the show we round up all the biggest stories in Formula 1 right now. We are currently in the Brazilian Grand Prix weekend, but which stories have been making the headlines so far this week? This week, Ferrari are reportedly not interested in extending Lewis Hamilton's contract with the team. Lawrence Stroll has stated he won't leave Formula 1 until Aston Martin become champions, and we bring you all of the action from the Sao Paulo sprint and qualifying session on Saturday. All that and a whole lot more is coming up in today's show. If you're watching on YouTube, skip to the timestamp in the video description to watch the story that you're most interested in. So, without further delay, let's dive in. So the grid for next year is almost set. There are only 4 seats still available, 3 at the Red Bull teams as well as the second seat at Alpine. So attention is already turning to 2027, where there are a lot of seats up for grabs, including the seat of Sir Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari, who are reportedly not keen on extending the 7-time world champions deal at Maranello. Now, of course, 2025 has been a very difficult debut year in red for Sir Lewis, but he is showing some signs of recovery. He is not that far off of Charles Leclerc in terms of his performances in the last few rounds. So is this a bit of a ill-judged move from Ferrari? Let's have a look at what they're thinking, guys. Because no one will deny that he's costing him a lot of money, and I think even the biggest Hamilton fan will probably admit that he's not really returned that much investment for the Italian team. But let's have a look at the full article here on the F1Chronicle.com. Ferrari are reportedly not planning to extend Lewis Hamilton's contract beyond its current expiry date at the end of the 2026 Formula 1 season, sparking speculation about the 7-time world champion's long-term future with the team. Hamilton joined Ferrari at the start of 2025 after leaving Mercedes, but according to ESPN, senior paddock sources claim the Italian team have no current intention of offering him a new deal once his existing contract runs out. If true, the decision would mean Hamilton's Ferrari stint could end after just 2 seasons. He will be 42 years of age at the start of the 2027 campaign, an age at which no driver has won a Formula 1 race since Jack Brabham triumphed in South Africa in 1970. And of course, there is someone very much waiting in the wings, and his name is Ollie Behrman. Ferrari junior Oliver Behrman is being tipped as a potential successor for Hamilton. The 20-year-old academy driver made his F1 debut in 2024 when he stood in for Carlos Sainz at Saudi Arabia, impressing the team with his calmness and pace. Hamilton's first year in red has been difficult. After 20 races in 2025, he remains without a podium finish for Ferrari, struggling to adapt to the car's handling characteristics. His lowest point came at the Hungarian Grand Prix, where he failed to score a single point, as the circuit has traditionally been one of his strongest. And he also basically said that he should be replaced, that he's not good enough and Ferrari should find a new driver. Obviously, they didn't do that, but could they be doing that in 2027? If rumours are to be believed, absolutely, it's possible. Meanwhile, teammate Charles Leclerc, whose own contract also expires at the end of 2026, leads Ferrari's internal standings by 64 points, with 4 races remaining this season. When Hamilton signed with Ferrari in February 2024, the team described the deal as multi-year, but did not specify its exact length. Reports from La Gazzetta dello Sport in August suggested Hamilton's £50 million per year contract includes an option to extend through 2027, though it remains unclear whether either party intends to trigger that clause. Despite his struggles, Hamilton has publicly stated he has no intention of retiring anytime soon. Speaking to L'Equipe last month, he reaffirmed his desire to bring success to Ferrari and capture an 8th world title, saying, quote, "I still have the fire. I came here to win and to help bring Ferrari back to the top. That hasn't changed." End quote. With both Ferrari drivers' contracts set to expire at the same time, 2026 could mark a major turning point for the Scuderia, one that may see the team usher in a new generation of talent as Formula 1 enters its next era. I mean, this is the thing, right? People have been saying this for a long time, and I 100% agree. The grid in 2027 is going to be markedly different to 2026. I mean, you look at the grid next year, it's almost exactly the same as this year. Very few seats have actually changed. The only real changes come in the form of Cadillac, who of course are a new team and are bringing 2 drivers back that have no full-time drive this year, Sergio Perez and Valtteri Bottas. other than that, nothing's really changing. Everything's staying the same. You might see some changes in the Red Bull seats. I've already talked about those, but aside from that, everything's staying the same. Aston Martin's the same, Ferrari's the same, McLaren is the same, Sauber's the same. Everybody's the same. So 2027, we're going to see big changes, and Hamilton is one of the key pieces in that jigsaw puzzle, and I pretty strongly think that if he leaves Ferrari, if he get out, and I firmly believe that if he leaves Ferrari, whether he leaves on his own accord or the team forces him out or it's a mutual decision, as they often say in these matters, I think he'll retire. I don't see him going anywhere else personally. But guys, get your thoughts in the comments below. Should Hamilton stay at Ferrari after 2026? Will he stay? We'll have to see what happens there, guys. I must admit, I did see this headline here on the F1Chronicle.com and I thought, I don't know about that. This seems like a bit of a skill issue. This seems like a bit of an excuse because at the end of the day, the Formula One circuits are the same for everybody. For lack of a better term, these drivers should just get on with it, especially if they are trying to win a championship this year like Oscar Piastri is. But team principal of McLaren Formula One team, Andrea Stella, is absolutely adamant that Piastri's dip in form is due to low grip circuits that he has recently raced on. Like I said, this does seem like a bit of a skill issue, but let's have a look at his reasoning here on the F1Chronicle.com, as always. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella believes that Oscar Piastri's recent drop in performance could be tied to a series of low-grip Formula One circuits, which have exposed a specific weakness in the Australian's driving style. After a commanding victory at the Dutch Grand Prix, Piastri led the Drivers' Championship by 34 points over teammate Lando Norris and held a 104-point advantage over Max Verstappen. However, just 6 races later, the tables have turned completely and Norris now leads the standings by 1 point, with Verstappen only 35 points behind heading into the final 4 rounds of the season. Piastri's recent form has been turbulent to say the least. In Azerbaijan, he endured a disastrous weekend, crashing in qualifying, jumping the start, and then colliding on the opening lap of the race before retiring. His misfortunes continued in the US GP sprint, where he crashed out with Norris at turn 1 on the opening lap. The Australian has not finished ahead of Norris in a race where both cars saw the checkered flag since the Belgian Grand Prix in July, and his last podium came in Italy, marking 4 consecutive races outside the top 3. Speaking after the Mexico City Grand Prix, Andrea Stella explained that McLaren's analysis suggested that Piastri's struggles are linked to how he adapts to low grip conditions, which is a characteristic shared by recent venues in Austin and Mexico City. Explaining, quote, "After qualifying in Mexico, we reviewed with Oscar extensively from data, comments and video. We extracted some important information about how the car needs to be driven in these special low grip conditions. It looks like you have to drive the car in a way that adapts to the fact that it slides a lot and can still produce a lap time. That's not necessarily the way that Oscar naturally feels he's producing lap time." End quote. The McLaren boss added that both car setup and driving adjustments were identified to help Piastri adapt, explaining, quote, "We found a few things that we could do with the car and a few things that he could do with his driving. Oscar should be very proud of how he's handled the transition from qualifying to the race. We saw that he applied what we discussed. His race pace was much more competitive. It's a shame that he couldn't use that pace properly because he spent the entire race looking at the gearbox of the car ahead." End quote. However, Stella is seeing the positives in this and putting it down very much to a learning experience for the young Aussie, who, lest we forget, is only in his 3rd season of Formula One. Saying, quote, "It's important for Oscar that we go through this kind of experience, learning new tools to add to the toolbox. That's how you become the most complete version of a Formula One driver. It's also important for the next 4 races where we'll face different conditions again. We need to be ready for all of them." End quote. And of course, rain is one of those conditions we'll likely see this weekend in Brazil. It's been forecast for Saturday. Of course, there is always a threat of thunderstorms in Interlagos. They can basically just come from nowhere. It's not too dissimilar in a sense to Belgium, although of course Belgium it's usually colder weather, but Brazil you very much do get a lot of big storms, so it's going to be very difficult. Of course, last year we saw a lot of issues with the track. I don't expect them to be repeated this year. Of course, the main reason why that was is because they resurfaced it right before the event. Great idea, guys, that's a fantastic one there, but we shouldn't see a repeat of that this year. Although Brazil in the wet is very difficult because it's a very uphill and downhill track. So yeah, pressure very much on Piastri. It's very much fight or flight for him right now. Is he going to rise to the challenge? Is he going to get his form back, or is he going to crumble? I see it really going one of two ways. And either way, no matter what happens, he can hold his head up high and say that he's competed in his first ever title fight in Formula 1, but he will be disappointed. However, if he doesn't get it this year, it will come. He will get a championship eventually. But guys, get your thoughts in the comments below. How is he going to perform this weekend? I want to hear what you have to say, as always. Interesting article here on the F1Chronicle.com concerning Lawrence Stroll and his Formula 1 team, Aston Martin. Stroll Sr. has vowed to not stop in F1 until his team wins the World Championship, something that I don't doubt is his ambition at all. He has hired several Formula 1 World Champions, and he's also hired some really, really high-profile staff members, not least, of course, Adrian Newey, their head of design, the man who has won more F1 championships than anybody else in the history of the sport, more than Colin Chapman back in the day, more than Enzo Ferrari back in the day, more than Frank Williams, more than Ron Dennis. This guy has achieved everywhere he's been. But there are some problems at Aston Martin, and I'm going to go through them here on the channel, guys. If it's not mentioned here in this article, I'm definitely going to mention it. Don't you worry. You already probably know what I'm talking about before I get into this. But let's have a look at what Mr. Strulovich has had to say about Aston Martin. Full article here on the F1Chronicle.com. Lawrence Stroll has reaffirmed his determination to turn Aston Martin into a Formula 1 champion, declaring that he will not give up until his ambitious mission is complete. The Canadian billionaire who led the takeover of Racing Point and rebranded it as Aston Martin at the end of 2022 has repeatedly spoken about his goal of transforming the team into consistent front runners. Since then, Aston Martin have made major investment to support that vision. The team has expanded its Silverstone headquarters, built a new state-of-the-art factory, and aggressively strengthened its technical department with high-profile hires. Among the most notable additions are Adrian Newey, who joined from Red Bull, and Enrico Cardile, formerly of Ferrari, two of the most respected names in the sport. Aston Martin will enter a new chapter in 2026 when they become a works team with Honda, who will supply power units under Formula 1's next generation engine regulations. Speaking on the team's official YouTube channel, Stroll said the partnership represents a major leap forward for Aston Martin's long-term competitiveness, saying, quote, "The whole team's forming into place and we're looking forward to next year, to a huge rules and regulation change. Another huge step we have is Honda being our power unit partner. Being a works team for the first time in our life is a whole different experience. Designing an engine that's mated together with a power unit as one, rather than being a customer and just being delivered an engine, is a tremendous step forward," end quote. Stroll also made clear that his commitment to the project remains unwavering as the team continues to climb towards its front of the grid ambitions, saying, quote, "A tremendous amount of excitement is happening. I'm relentless. I don't give up until the mission is completed. In this case, the mission is being world champions," end quote. With a strengthened technical lineup, a new works partnership with Honda, and a clear long-term vision, Aston Martin's next phase under Stroll's leadership is shaping up to be the most ambitious yet. I've said it many times, and I'll say it again, Aston Martin, in theory, there is no reason why they can't be challenging for the World Championship next year. They have an incredible driver in the form of Fernando Alonso. They have works power units from Honda, one of the most respected motorsports marques in the world. They have world-class facilities. They have some of the best backroom staff members in the business when it comes to the technical minds of Adrian Newey, Enrico Cardile, and also the leadership of the likes of Andy Cowell as well in the team. There is no reason why they can't succeed. It's just Lance Stroll. That's the one weak link. And they always say you're only as strong as your weakest link. And I think when it comes to the Formula 1 Constructors' World Championship, I agree with that. You've got Red Bull, right? And the weak link is the car in the hands of Yuki Tsunoda. So they will never win a World Championship as a constructor with Yuki Tsunoda in that second car, as long as that car is not working in his hands as it should be, if you know what I'm saying. I don't think Yuki Tsunoda is a bad driver, to be honest. It just doesn't work when it comes to... It's just not working out when it comes to Red Bull, and it'll probably be the same for anybody else you put in there if they go with the same kind of ridiculous philosophy. So when it comes to Aston Martin, if they want to be Constructors' World Championships, which they no doubt do, I can genuinely see a scenario where Fernando Alonso might win the World Championship next year, but you could have Lance Stroll down in 8th place, which is pretty much what Sergio Perez did last year for Red Bull, absolutely miles off it, and they didn't win the Constructors' title. You'll get a Mercedes or a Ferrari or a McLaren winning the Constructors' Championship instead of Aston Martin. So if they want to be Drivers' World Champions, they can absolutely have Lance Stroll alongside a Verstappen in the future, or a Fernando Alonso, right? That they can do that. That can be a thing. That can 100% be a thing. But when it comes to being a Constructors' World Champion, I don't think they can ever do it with Lance Stroll in that second car. Just my opinion. Maybe I'm being harsh, but I genuinely think that's the case. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Who says that sprint races are boring? Who says that they are not important in Formula 1? Because we had an absolutely sensational Sao Paulo sprint today on Saturday, and it's really, really shaken up the championship battle. Here are the 5 things that we learned from the Sao Paulo Grand Prix sprint today. Now, there were reports of this race potentially being under threat in terms of the weather. A lot of people sharing this forecast that's saying there was going to be 100-mile-an-hour winds and tropical storms. And as usual, a lot of these reports turned out to be absolutely bogus. Although, admittedly, today's weather was very different when compared to Friday. There was a decent amount of rain in the morning. However, by the start of the Grand Prix, it had stopped. Although, it was far from dry in the opening stages. It was dry enough to be able to go out on slick tyres, but especially along the long pit straight, it was anything but dry, and it was a long way from dry as well going through the Senna S. More on that very soon, but yeah, that made it very interesting in terms of the tyre choices. Most drivers ended up going for the medium tyre, but some, such as the Mercedes guys, ended up starting on the soft to try and get a faster start. But that all flip-flop, that all completely changed around when Oscar Piastri spun out of the race. He was running in P3, the position that he qualified in. He was trying to chase down Kimi Antonelli, who was running an excellent second at that time. But it was not to be. He ended up spinning through the exit of the Senna S, the exit of turn 3. Now, the reason why he spun, and this has been the topic of a lot of debate and a lot of controversy, but I firmly believe the reason why he spun was basically largely down to a skill issue. I'm sorry, Oscar Piastri, I have to say it. Because at the end of the day, even though Lando Norris flicked up some water onto the track, Kimi Antonelli didn't spin off. He went through that first. He would have got more moisture on his tyres than what Oscar Piastri did. And of course, Kimi Antonelli is a much less experienced driver. He's 19 years of age. He is in his rookie season. We talk about Piastri being inexperienced, and he is inexperienced relatively in Formula 1 terms, but he is still in his 3rd season. He basically just went too much on the curbs, too much moisture on the tyres, and spun out as a result. He was not the only one to do so. Franco Colapinto had quite a heavy impact. He was out of the race as well on that same lap, spinning in pretty much the exact same spot. Nico Hülkenberg also spun out. Again, very experienced drivers. It could happen to anybody. But still, when you're going for a championship like that, it's not a great look. Hülkenberg did, of course, continue. He was down at the back of the grid. He ended up having to have his front and rear wing replaced, but Sauber got him out there again. Fair play to them for that. But yeah, really, really bad for Oscar Piastri. That is the last thing that his title challenge needs. Now, that meant that there was a red flag thrown into Lagos because of the damage to the barriers. There was a pause of about 20-30 minutes or so as a result of that. And at the restart, essentially everybody could change their tyres. Everybody could do whatever repairs they needed to their car. And that meant that a lot of guys actually went for the soft tyres, and that ended up being the wrong move. But despite that, Lando Norris still won the sprint. He was one of the guys that went onto the soft tyres. He did get quite a big advantage off the start and in the earlier stages of the race. But eventually, Kimi Antonelli was really hounding him to get that win. But in the end, it's 8 points gained for Lando Norris. That is a huge result for him. But yeah, excellent day for Mercedes. Third thing that we learned, a double podium for Mercedes. George Russell did challenge Kimi Antonelli at the start and also at the restart as well. Couldn't get past him on either occasion. Excellent result for the youngster, and a great result as well for George Russell. Of course, Russell won the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2022, completing a double, as it were, during that weekend, because he also won the sprint race during that weekend too. So yeah, excellent from Kimi. Great for George as well. Mercedes gaining some big points in that constructors battle. It's very close between second through to fourth. Red Bull and Ferrari also in that battle too. But how did Max Verstappen do? Well, he did as well as he could, to be honest with you. He ended up getting in P4. He overtook Fernando Alonso off the line, and he also managed to overtake Oscar Piastri because Piastri crashed out, so he ended up going from P6 to P4. Basically, that was as good as it was ever going to get from him, unfortunately. Red Bull just do not have the pace this weekend, and as we'll see in the qualifying review, that might be the highlight of his weekend because he did not have a good qualifying session later in the day. And the final thing that we learned is, thank God Gabriel Bortoleto is alright. What a horrific accident did the boy from Brazil. He was trying to go for an overtaking maneuver on one of the Racing Bulls, I believe. I think it was Isaac Hadjar. And at that time, he basically dived down the inside going into turn 1. The car was offline. It was not a dry line either, so grip was very much at a premium. It's very bumpy at that part of the track, and he also had his DRS flap open, I do believe, at that point too. So that really unsettled the rear of the car. He lost control of the rear of the car, slammed into the pit wall, and then just careered off the side of the track. Big impact into the barriers. It was a 57G impact. Thankfully, he said he was relatively okay. However, his car was very much not okay, and Sauber were unable to repair it in time for qualifying. He will start the race at the discretion of the stewards and pending any kind of medical investigation as well, but I do expect him to start the race tomorrow on Sunday, albeit from the very back, if not the pit lane. But yeah, those were the 5 things that we learned from the sprint race, guys. So much going on. Controversial clash between Ollie Behrman and Liam Lawson that I've not mentioned. Pierre Gasly getting points as well in the Alpine. That is no mean feat as well. And Aston Martin absolutely botching the strategy, but they still get some points from Fernando Alonso's performance. Well, the sprint in Sao Paulo was absolutely sensational on Saturday morning, but the qualifying session on Saturday afternoon has well and truly mixed up the order for tomorrow's Brazilian Grand Prix. Let's have a look at the 5 highlight results, the 5 main things that we learned from qualifying today around Interlagos. And the first thing that we learned is that Max Verstappen absolutely has it all to do again. 12 months ago, of course, he completed a sensational drive going from 17th on the grid up to 1st by the finish. He absolutely dominated the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2024, but he's arguably got an even bigger challenge ahead of him this time because that Red Bull this year is not on the same level of the Red Bull from last year, and he's going to start in P16. He didn't have a great qualifying nor a fantastic sprint either. Qualified in P6, finished in P4, was miles off it in terms of his pace overall when compared to the Mercedes and McLaren cars ahead of him. But this time he's got a lot of work to do. Why was he out in Q1? Lack of pace. I don't think he made a really big mistake, to be honest with you. The changes that they made based on the feedback that Max gave between the sprint and qualifying, because obviously the cars come out of Parc Fermé between them, it just didn't work out. Lauren Makes was on the pit wall and speaking to the Sky Sports F1 coverage, and he basically said, look, we took a gamble. Like, we took a gamble at Silverstone and Suzuka and places like that. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't. This didn't. Neither Red Bull really having much pace at all. Yuki Tsunoda starts down in P19. But yeah, Max very much has it all to do. He's going to need a miracle. Are his championship hopes over? Well, I think unless he gets up to the podium tomorrow, I think they probably are over. I mean, there's always a chance it is Max at the end of the day, but with where his rivals are going to start tomorrow, it's a very tall order to see him beat either of them, really, to be honest. But we will see how things evolve. It is Brazil. Anything can happen. Absolutely anything can happen, and it usually does. Anyway, second thing we learned, Aston Martin suck, or at least, again, another team that really saw a big downturn. I mean, they qualified fantastically for the sprint. It kind of fell away from a bit in the sprint because they chose the wrong tyres. They went for the softs in the second stint of that race, with the red flag effectively allowing everybody to be able to change tyres. They went for the wrong tyre and lost points as a result, but they're going to have a really, really tough job on for them tomorrow to be able to score points. It's possible they are just outside the top 10, Alonso in P11 and Stroll in P14, but compared to being, P4 and P7 or something like that in sprint qualifying, that is a big downturn. What a difference 24 hours can make, eh? But some things that haven't changed is Kimi Antonelli's pace. This guy is absolutely on fire. Second place again. He's done it again. I mean, honestly, with the pace the guys had this weekend, I mean, he was absolutely hounding Lando Norris in the latter stages of the sprint race, albeit, of course, Antonelli was on the better tyres at that point, you know. There's every chance he could do it, you know. There's every chance. I mean, the grid should be dry tomorrow. The big thing today in the sprint was the fact that he was on the dirty side of the grid, and he was also a damp side of the grid as well, you know. On slick tyres, that is the last thing you want. It should be bone dry tomorrow for the Brazilian Grand Prix. I don't believe rain is forecast on Sunday, so he's got every chance. He can make it very awkward, but yeah, another front row start for him. Brilliant. And for a guy that needed a result like this, you know, he needs a good result. He was a long way ahead of George Russell. George Russell just could not work with the soft tyres. He could not get them to switch on. And indeed, he set his final qualifying lap on mediums, and it was faster than what he did on the softs. So he ended up in P6 as a result, a decent result in the end. But yeah, great for one Mercedes, disappointing for the other. Fantastic, though, for the Racing Bulls. I mean, the Red Bulls, neither of them even made it into Q2, but both of the Racing Bulls, Isaac Hadjar and Liam Lawson, they made it into Q3. Really solid result. Hadjar pulling out an incredible result in qualifying yet again, getting P5. Lawson in P7. Very solid from the pair of them. I mean, remember, Pierre Gasly got a podium here in a Toro Rosso, which is now effectively what the Racing Bulls are in 2019, I do believe. So, you know, they've got some history around this track. You never know. Stranger things have happened. But the final thing we learned, how did it go between the two McLarens? How did they do? Well, Lando Norris will again start in P1. He's claimed another pole position, back-to-back pole positions, I think for the first time in his career, they were saying. Absolutely imperious again. He couldn't get it together for his first lap in Q3, but his second lap was absolutely mesmeric. Brilliant job from Lando Norris to start on P1 again. Oscar Piastri, he's down in P4. I mean, given everything that happened in the sprint, given how much, you know, that's going to be weighing on his mind, no doubt, I don't think that's a bad result, really, to be honest. He'll be disappointed, of course. He'll be on the dirty side of the grid, but from P4, it is far from over. Although, if Lando Norris does his job again, just like he did in the sprint earlier today, just like he did in the Mexican Grand Prix a few weeks back, I don't think he'll be able to catch him. Because the Mercedes of the Mercedes of Kimi Antonelli and the Ferrari as well of Charles Leclerc. Excellent, brilliant result for him. P3. I mean, Ferrari have not had a good weekend so far this weekend, but he is up there again. He is a master of qualifying, is Charles Leclerc, and will bring you everything that happens